Hello, YouTube. Welcome back. So today I am going to do some feet pics for money. No, not really, but I'm this close every time, I swear. Anyway, so I'm doing some string weaving, and this is just plain white kitchen string. I do not endorse doing this with strings that are all the same color. It's really confusing. Um, But if you want to follow along and do this with me, how this works, how I have this set up, is you cut two nice long pieces of string and one that's half as long as the other two. And the longer two are going to fold in half. You tie that shorter one to that halfway point, and then you tie them all in a knot so it makes a loop halfway through. And you can use that loop to attach it to your finger or your toe or a clipboard or what have you. This just happens to be the easiest way I know to handle all of this string here by tying it on my foot. So, um, how I'm doing this for those of you who do want to follow along. So we've got strings 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you can do this with 6 strings or however many, but I did it with 5. And so we take string number 1 and we're going to do a forward knot twice over each string. Always double knot it. And I'm going to do that all the way down to the other side and then almost all the way back. I'm going to do it back over string 5, 4, and 3. And then string number 2 becomes the new string number 1 in this case, and I do a forward knot all the way down and then all the way back with string number 2. Then I take it off, flip it over, and string 4 and 5 will become the new strings 1 and 2, and I just do that process over again, all the way down, almost all the way back, and all the way down, all the way back, and flip it over again and repeat. So by the end of this, the middle string, string number 3, will be longer than the others, and I can use that to like tie it off and attach a button or whatever by the time I get to the end of this. Okay, so let's get into our ramble. I wanted to talk about more a little bit about me and do sort of my artist's life story sort of thing. But then I realized that if I were going to tell the story of my creative endeavors, I would just be telling my entire life story, point blank. And then we'd be here all day. So in the interest of time and making it more organized and easier to digest on both our ends, I decided to cut it up into parts and talk about each thing separately. So starting at the beginning, that means we're starting with the day I was born. No, almost, but no. We're starting with dance classes. So dance classes are actually some of the earliest memories I am conscious of having. I started dancing pretty much the same time I started going to school. So early on, when I was about 6, and I danced and I did ballet and tap and jazz up until about 13, right after 8th grade. So first I want to talk about why this was such a good move for my parents. I am a huge supporter of things like dance class, gymnastics, any kind of scouts, horseback riding, anything that gives you that same activity level of a sport, like an extracurricular sport, without as much competitive nature. As a kid, personally, I was always on the rather petite side. I was never very fast or very muscular or very strong, and it was hard for me to keep up with other kids in sports. And it always, I always took a really big hit to my self-esteem in those cases. I actually remember this one time when my mother enrolled me in soccer camp over the summer because I did want to learn how to play soccer and how to do like ball tricks and stuff. But I didn't last 2 weeks at soccer camp because the main activity was a counselor tossing a ball into the field and saying, and get the ball, every kid for themselves, keep it as long as you can, and go. And I just never once touched the soccer ball in this case. I I gave up after a point. My mother tells the story that she went to pick me up one day and she saw all of the kids running in a big group after the soccer ball on one end of the field, and on the other, there was me sitting in a puddle playing with the mud because I had just given up. I was like, well, I'm not gonna be as good as the other kids and I'm not going to achieve this goal. So, what's the point? Um, so competitive sports and team sports are great for a lot of kids, but I am a huge supporter of sporting activities that don't like measure kids against each other. I am very all for things like dance class where our teachers at the studio were very conscious of creating a positive environment for us. Um, they never singled anybody out in a negative way. There was no like, well, Sally's the best in class, so Susie, you really need to watch Sally and get better at this. There was no barring anybody from class due to skill level or improvement level. It was just a bunch of children in a ballet studio, just having fun in tights and ballet shoes. Um, I did feel a lot better about doing ballet than I felt about doing other sporting activities because it relied less on like traditional strength and more on flexibility and endurance and grace and a lot of the areas that I was better in. Um, so I felt really good about, dancing in general, and the positive environment helped, and it still provided me with that structured social environment with something in common so we could make friends. I actually made friends in dance class right off the bat that ended up becoming my school friends when we realized we went to the same school. And we were friends until, up through high school. So it was very important for me. And all of this culminated at the end of the year in these recitals where our teacher, the owner of the studio, would rent out this big auditorium. And looking back on it, I know now that it was like just a high school auditorium in a really nice suburb. But when you're a little 6-year-old kid, it feels like you're going to dance at the Royal Ballet. It's very special. And they would have a merch table, and the audience would always be full. And we got all of the classes together backstage to do this recital. So we got to meet other students that we basically didn't get to see all year unless we were the class right before or right after them. So it was a lot of fun. The recitals were a big deal, and for a lot of us, it was our first taste of the stage life, basically. Um, it was our first taste of things like stage makeup and sequins and costumes and huddling in a band room around a crappy TV monitor while the chaperone stage manager comes around like, shh, you guys have to stop talking. The audience can hear you. And like, um, okay, but we're in a whole separate room and the music on that stage is blaring. I don't think they could hear as much as you thought they could. But anyway, it was part of the experience. Um, and Tiny Me just ate that experience up. It was such a special time for me. It was like I remember those recitals, um, which is a big deal for me for my childhood. And my parents would always get me something from the merch table afterward. My dad would always get me like a single rose or something, and there was a music box and a Christmas ornament with ballet slippers. I danced for a long time. I got a lot of swag off my parents that way, I'm not gonna lie. um, but it was a big deal. And like I said, for a 6-year-old, it feels like your big debut, your big performance at the Royal Ballet. It feels very special. And Tiny Me lived for these experiences. I lived for dance class. You know how some kids are horse girls or mathletes or what have you? I was a dance kid. That was my life. Um, and I just remember having this sense of clarity and foresight that I don't think I've ever experienced as an adult back then. Um, Another part of these recitals that we put on was a little trophy ceremony right before intermission, where basically they'd celebrate, the students that had been with the studio for 5 years, 10 years, the soloist students who were taking private lessons, all that good stuff. And they were just, cheap soccer tournament trophies with plastic gold ballerinas on top, but as a kid, it mattered. And I was so excited to get my 5-year trophy. I was looking forward and planning for it since halfway through year 3. I was like, oh, can I just have it now? I'm practically there. And I remember getting my 5-year trophy and feeling like this is it. This is the thing. I am going to do this for the rest of my life. I am going to be on this stage getting my 10-year trophy in another 5 years. After that, when I turn 16, I will be a grown up and I will be allowed to start toe shoes. I know toe shoes are actually really bad for your feet and they hurt and bleed, and I probably dodged a bullet on that one. But like as a kid, that was how I measured growing up almost, was how much longer I had to wait to start toe shoes at 16. It was very important for me. And I was so focused on that, and I knew what I was going to do. I was planning 5, 6 years ahead in my life as a 10-year-old, which is important for me as an ADHD sufferer. I'm sure some of you are aware that we don't really do foresight and goal setting long term, especially later in life when my depression and anxiety started developing more, and that foresight got even shorter because I was not sure I was even going to be alive that much longer at some points in my life. Um, but as a kid, I had this clarity and foresight about these big milestones. I was like, I am going to keep dancing for another 5 years, another 10 years. I am going to do toe shoes. I am going to be a ballerina. This is the thing. This is me. And I unfortunately didn't make it to those milestones. Um, like I said, about 13 years old, at the end of eighth grade, my parents decided to take me out of dance classes. And I was going through some changes during that time in life, like everybody is. And some of them were emotional and mental changes where I was discovering myself more as an individual and discovering my own personality and who I wanted to be. And there was just a shift in focus where I used to be like an honor roll student, A's and B's, because learning as a kid is fun. Elementary school is all about let's go out and experience the universe. Let's go to a museum. Let's do a science experiment. Let's read a fantasy book. Let's go look at bugs. And the older you get, the more boring it gets. And the more focused your schooling is on how to make you a productive member of adult society. I'm sorry, that's getting really defeatist, but that's what it felt like to me, especially at that time, going into eighth grade, experiencing that shift from elementary school into high school. And my focus started to shift away from being interested in learning and more into the world around me and becoming more aware of things like there are wars and there are people starving in other countries and there are things happening all over the world that we don't see every day. And social drama started cropping up, friend drama, family drama. There was growing friction between me and my parents on a daily basis. And my depression anxiety also started to come out more as I got further into my teen years. So, at the onset of all of that, my parents decided you should focus on your homework. You should just stay home and do homework. So, we're going to take you out of dance classes only temporarily, quote unquote, which wasn't true, um, to focus on my homework, which I ended up not doing ever anyway. And I always resented having that decision made for me. And I always thought it was weird because, like, I look back on it and I think about I was so sure of my future at that point. If I had been allowed to keep going, I could have gone to college for dance. I could have gotten into a state ballet or a ballet troupe. I could have had a stable career that I was in love with. I could be a couple years from retiring at my current age. But it just wasn't meant to be, I guess. And I think about how the one thing that was probably holding all this terrible stuff in my brain back, the one thing that was like the cork on the bottle, was the one thing that my parents decided was optional. That the art in my life was optional. The creative, active thing that I was doing was optional. And it was more important for me to focus on becoming a member of society. So, yeah, I resent that. And it sets kind of a precedent for some of the other things I did in life and some of my other artistic endeavors, which I guess I'll talk about in later parts of this uh series. I'm doing a series. That's weird. Um but yeah. So that brings us to the end of the story that is dance classes from 6 years old to 13 years old, and why it was important and what a big impact it had on my life. Um, I always think it's funny to this day, my body retains some of the muscle memory from my childhood. Getting back into more athletic endeavors later in life was definitely, I mean, I wouldn't say that I retained being in shape, but something in my body was just waiting there to wake up and be like, oh, yes, I remember how to do this. This is what I'm built for, essentially. And I always felt like that gave me an advantage. But I'll talk about that later. Anyway, that's the end of the story. Um, the rest of this video, I am going to cut out the voiceover and just do a montage of me finishing up this lovely bracelet I'm weaving and being silly with some 80s music. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope that your day has been good so far, that the rest of it will be good. Treat yourself, do something nice for yourself. I love you. Thank you so much for listening to my ramble and watching me do art. Okay, voiceover Rose, peacing out. Bye bye. We don't talk about rats, no, no. So, how was your day? I went out and got groceries. Uh-huh. Oh, that's nice. Good for you. I don't know where my phone is, or else I would turn on music and sing to you guys. Boo. What should I listen to? Give me a minute. Forget about me. Don't you forget about me. Okay, I think that's probably good. Oh yeah, that's bracelet sized. Here we are with our finished project. Well, not finished, but at least this end of the project is done. I don't know if the camera is focusing on that very well, but there it is. It did come out much less lumpy than the last time I tried to do this. So, I'm counting this as usable. Definitely. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for enjoying the feet pics. Thank you for enjoying the story. Or tolerating the story. I don't know. And watching me make art. Alright. Bye-bye, YouTube. It's been fun.